the Coalesce podcast. My name's Grant.
And I'm Meg.
And today we are going to take a look at the security aspects inside Coalesce. And so we have some attributes we're going to look at, some pages that are going to help out with that. But really saying, hey, how do we just go ahead and understand what Coalesce offers with respect to security, which is actually quite a bit of stuff and provides multiple layers of security. And so it just provides us a really basic level to start with, but then that rabbit hole kind of goes as deep as you'd like it to, all the way down to kind of rolling in on security. So the first thing to know is that Coalesce is secure by default. So by default, if you secure an endpoint, it is going to force whoever calls that endpoint to be logged in. Now, you may ask, well, hey, our app doesn't have any login. So how can this be true? And the answer is that we have what we call dummy security built in so that your app will actually work and hopefully allow you to fall into the pit of success, but not completely sabotage your app by leaving it wide open. Because most people will want some kind of security so that when you take out the dummy security and you put in your own, the app will still be basically secured, at least with the idea that you have to be able to log into the system in order to get there. So Meg, let's go ahead and look at that dummy security real quick. You just see how that works. And we're not planning to go into a bunch of detail about security. We may, if there's enough comments to say, hey, we need to know how to layer in either Windows off or Azure Active Directory off, or maybe just individual account off into the app. We can totally go over some of those things. It's just it's a fairly deep rabbit hole. So great. Let's just kind of talk about this dummy security there.
Yeah, so as you can kind of see, there's a big to-do comment on here. And this is just put in here by default when you make the Coalesce template. And it's really just to make Coalesce happy initially when you're creating your first app. But it's not really doing anything for you. As you can see, it's really just setting up some kind of fake claims and then just a fake claim identity, just so that Coalesce has some kind of claims to go off.
And that really is it. I mean, we're literally just shortcutting everything else. And when you think about how it kind of works, you get a single claim, which is the name, you get an identity, which is the dummy auth, and then we're just going to jam that into the user, the context, the user object that's on the context.
Yeah.
And we're just then invoking the next. So it's just
anyone that gets here just gets this off.
Gets you off. So you would come in here, replace this so that it uses all the built-in .NET stuff as part of the framework, ASP.NET. But here we're literally just shortcutting it so that you don't have to add specific tables to your database or anything like that. It just provides this basic. If you log on, if you go and hit the pipeline, you are automatically set up as a user with the name of dummy user.
Yeah, and with some dummy auth.
With an identity of dummy auth is the one that's listening for you. So anyway, that's how that works. It's actually kind of illustrative of how the auth works in its most simple form, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously not providing any security, but it does do that. So what we can do is from here, we can just show, hey, what are the real basics? So again, let's go show the page.
Yeah.
So Coalesce actually has a page that allows us to see what the security profile is, because whenever you have auto-generated code or things where you're using like attributes and stuff like that, you want to be able to have confidence that you've secured something correctly. And so there's actually a page.
Yeah, and you can see this is registered for you, but if you're going to try and make a Coalesce app without using the template and hook it up yourself, if you wanted this page that we're talking about, you would register it here with this map Coalesce security overview. And then this is the URL of the page, or the slug, I guess. So you'd come here and you'd just go to Coalesce-security, and you get this really nice security overview page. And if you kind of take a look at this, you can see you have your answer endpoint, you've got your question endpoint, and we've even got our service on here, our question service. And it shows you all the things on these. So this is the read, create, edit, delete on the class itself, like the model of answer. And then you have your answer ID, your text, your question ID, your question, and it shows you the different permissions around those. And that's true for all these guys.
Let's just look at a few of these just so we can kind of make sure we're understanding what's going on. So for the first, let's look at an answer. So create, read, edit, delete. That is at the class level. So that means that anyone who's authenticated can do any of those functions to the object as a whole.
Yep.
Can read the object, create, edit, delete the object.
You can see the calls you can make. So get, list, count, save, bulk save, delete, all that sort of stuff. Those are things that these will let you do.
And create and edit, while they're the same endpoint, it just determine whether you're doing a create or an edit. So even though the endpoints are exactly the same, allowing for basically upstart functionality right out of the box. You don't have to decide whether something's new or not. When you push it up there, it'll figure it out for you. So now let's talk about the actual, so then let's go down to the next column. So, or down to the next area. So behaviors, I'm sorry, we can just stay.
Oh,
we can be on questions.
this area, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So behaviors, these are just the behaviors we've set up. And then the data sources, these are the two data sources. So you can see both data sources that are going to be exposed out to the client. Now, on the generated DTO properties, this is really great because number one, you're going to see the primary keys. And the reason you kind of see what's going on. So in this case, the answer ID, I can read that. So as a field or as a property of the answer, I can read the answer ID. I can create a new answer ID, although it is a primary key, but I can't edit it. And so that's an automatic deny because we know that that is a key.
Yeah.
You can't change your primary keys once you create a thing.
Well, to be clear, I think that this is actually a deny because we set this up as an init. So I think we made this a set and you read your
Oh, you could.
we can test it real quick just to see. I'm not 100% positive, but I'm like.
So now you have to do a Coalesce regen, and then we have to stop the app and do all the things.
Yeah. So 1 sec. We don't need the app running right now, anyways.
So this will not only look at the security attributes that we'll show you in a second, but it also looks at the fundamental state of how you've exposed the properties, right? So if a property isn't exposed in a way that allows you to edit it, then obviously you're not going to be able to edit that property, and it's going to show you right there. So, and because this is kind of a weird one because they are strings, but they're auto-generated in the database.
Yep.
So we'll have to check this and see.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this will change it, but I'm not 100% sure. So let's just check.
So we'll just run this real fast.
Luckily, it's pretty small and quick to run.
Yeah, and usually the Coalesce generation times aren't super long. I mean, if it takes 30 seconds, you have a pretty big, pretty sized model to build off of. Okay. The nice thing is you're not doing it super often either. So
yeah, start up, and then we're gonna go to /Coalesce security, and now, yep, there you go. So now,
there you go. So now we can. It was just because we had the emitter there. You actually, in this case, you could modify that particular key. Although I don't know that I'd recommend.
Don't modify your primary keys.
But that particular one was just set up because of the init. Changed it back. So let's see. Do we still have the page up? We can talk about that
right
while it's going. So and then we have the question down there. Similar thing going on. That is the navigation property.
Yeah.
And so you can't edit that. That's not something.
Just because it's a navigation property. I mean, you can't do these things to it. This is the thing that you'd want to make sure you secure.
And down there you see the types right there, and so you can just click on question. They're below the word question, and it takes you down to the question service too. And so this gives you just a nice way to be able to do all of those things. So, and then it actually shows you the usages over there where you're returning a question. So this kind of gives you an idea of what your surface is, where you can get back this particular object. And so again, Andrew built this page. It's really awesome. You can do so many nice things with this, and it really gives you an idea for what exactly is happening with your particular API and how that's exposed to the outside user. So first thing we want to do is let's see if we can expose something that is allowable.
Yes. So we're thinking, because this is a trivia game, maybe we should allow anybody to read our questions and answers, or at least our questions.
Let's just try that and see what happens. Like, let's just make the question so you can read a question.
So we're going to go over to our question. And so Grant wants it so that we can read a question. So we want to do this on the class itself. Now, something that I like to do, that way it's really clear to everybody, is I actually like to specify all four, read, create, delete, and edit, just to be clear of what I want to have happen.
So these are the attributes we're going to put on the actual class. And there's attributes you can put at various levels, but this one's on the class.
So allow all is just going to allow anybody to read this. And then we only want authenticated people to read this. Now, this is by default. You actually don't have to specify this. By default, allow authorized is what you're going to get. But again, I like it to be very clear. That way, when I come in here, I see this and I say, oh yeah, I actually did want this to be.
And what are the other options we could put in there? So when we say delete, like let's say we only want somebody that has a particular permission, like a role, to be able to do that.
So you can definitely do roles. We don't have any roles set up because we don't have like real auth.
This would be the whole, hey, we have to do real auth. So if you want us to do that, go ahead and put a comment in. And we'll take a look at that.
But you could do something like role dot like admin or whatever you want to do here, and it'll hook that up.
Okay, so in this case, we're just literally putting the name of the role that we want to have access to that.
Yep.
Or you can have a comma separated list of values.
Yep.
It works exactly the same way as the regular .NET stuff. So now we have to run Coalesce again. And there was a note on the top of that page that says, hey, if you don't run Coalesce, the data in that form is not accurate. So know that it's not just going to go figure it out. You have to run Coalesce in order to figure that out. It's right there. There's a big important note. So make sure you run Coalesce whenever you make security attribute changes. And one thing we actually kind of recommend is if you're using a production pipeline, you should probably run Coalesce in the production pipeline and just make sure nothing changes. Because Coalesce should never update any files if it's been run while after there were changes made that would impact that.
Okay.
So sorry about this. We're having to run Coalesce a whole bunch of times and stop and restart our app. So it's going to be a little bit of trying to figure out what to say while we
do that. You typically do this all at once, then you update, but for the sake of just seeing what happens.
Yeah, so you kind of see what's going on.
Okay, so we're on answer. Here we go. So and you see it's kind of in red because that's a little bit of a dangerous thing to do, just allow anybody.
You just want to draw your eye to the things where you may have a security issue.
Yep.
And so here you saw a change. Now we wouldn't we wouldn't have had to specify each one of those, but it does allow us to. So what if we went down in and actually secured one of the properties?
Yeah. So let's say, for example, one way you could do this. Okay. So let's say, for example, that you can't change the correct answer.
Change the correct. That's a great example.
Yeah. So a little bit weird. If you didn't want to change the correct answer after you said it, you would just make this init. But we've already seen that, so let's do something else.
Let's just make up a role for like admin or something, because we can just put a role in there even if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, we can. Right now. So these have edit and they have read on them. Now, if you do, you can also do read only. Now, if you do read and you don't specify an edit, then nobody's going to be able to edit this. So, but let's do maybe just.
So these ones work a little bit differently in that you have to specify them in the pair.
Yeah. Yeah, or you can just do edit, and then if you can edit, you can read, right?
Edit assumes read.
Yeah, because that'd be really weird. Yeah. But read does not assume edit, obviously. So just be careful about that. So yeah, we can do like roles equals admin or something like that. Now we don't have any admin roles.
No, you made it so you can read. Well, everybody can read it because it's set to allow read for everybody.
Yeah, so everybody can read this right now. And if I only wanted to read for admins, I would do read roles equals admin, but we're going to say everybody can read, but only admins can edit the correct answer. So now when I run Coalesce, and then we'll just stop this preemptively. Okay, so we've got one thing there changed. We'll start that and we'll go look at that looks like on the page. And you can see these changes in the generated code too.
And many of these changes they're happening at some different levels, right? So when you're looking at your class, a lot of those changes are actually happening at the controller, the generated controller. You go look at the generated controller and see the attributes on the generated controller if you want to, but you can also go in and see the changes in the actual, we do the mapping from the actual class to the DTO. That's where all what we would call security trimming happens. And so here you can see, if you want to move your mouse over there, Meg, there you go, perfect. There we see allow only admin, and it shows the role.
Yep. Yeah, so if you had an admin role, that would hook up for you. Now, another interesting thing you can do is you can do custom restrictions. So let's do one here. Maybe we won't write a full restriction, but there's this thing called a restrict, and then you give it a type, and the type is a class, actually. And what this does is instead of just checking a role on your claims, you can run some custom code to do authentication. So this is very helpful.
That's nice.
If you have database relationships.
For example, if I wanted to change so that either an admin or the person who created the question could edit it, right? So I could then go in and add a restriction that would allow only editing of the question with that kind of a situation. So I could do that. And again, that user is available to you when you build those restrictions. And the restrictions are just going to inherit from the restriction class.
They inherit from iProperty restriction, I think. Yeah. So if you wanted to make a little restriction class, it would just be, we'll just do it. I'll just do a really quick example. You just do my restriction and probably put it in a different file. And then that would inherit from my property.
Is there an iClass restriction as well?
Yeah, this should be a class. There we go. And then you can just go ahead and make class. You'd kind of implement that interface, right? And then here,
Yeah, show us what the interfaces are there.
yeah, let's
Just
do
just
that.
do an implement all over here.
So, and then you have a can read, a can write. There's a couple of other things on here too. If we just kind of look at this, but those are the two that you have to implement. I think there's a can query, so you can change who's allowed to query it. I might be wrong about that. I thought there was. There's a way to do this, but now I'm
And I think the queries could also be handled in the
yeah.
data sources too.
Yeah, they can be handled data source. But anyways, your can read and can write, and then here you get your property name coming in, you have your model, and then you have access to your database if you want to kind of inject that. So you can do database checks, and that's a great way to secure if you have database relationships rather than just roles. Which
And you can also do policy checks as well. If you want to just do some kind of a policy check, that's also cool. Because so it just depends on what your security model is, right? You may just have a, hey, we don't care, it's all public. We may have a, hey, if you're logged in, you can do all the things. You're logged in, you have roles, you can do the things with roles. You're logged in, you have policies. We want to do things with policies. Again, it's just, we're really just mirroring what's available inside of the .NET or ASP.NET framework and pushing that forward to allow you to do that right here within your classes, rather than having to go in and write all the security, because the security gets a little bit obscured because we're trying to do all that mapping for you. Now, you can, again, do all this by hand. If you want to use services for everything, you can totally use services to expose your stuff, except for your admin. And then you can basically just use the admin pages to be able to change all the things and restrict it down a little bit differently. Yep. So these don't apply to the restrictions when you do services. You could, if you restrict these and then you have a service that allows you to write something that you can't write somewhere else, it's going to do that because you're going directly against the database. So these are just, this is just the code that is doing the regular old methods on these particular classes. And it's going to do the security trimming for your objects and the child objects as well. So, but just be really careful, because just like in any other app, you can get into some weird situations when you're returning, like, let's say several objects down. You have to make sure you're securing each level of object, because like if I do the third level down, and I save that back, the save, if I don't want to be able to save that, I have to reject the save on the third level down, not on the primary object. So remember that these are in kind of an object hierarchy, and you have to secure at each level as appropriate.
Yeah. And on top of that too, just remember that Coalesce is sanitizing kind of your API. You can definitely bypass this in the service. So for example, if I wanted my question to be readable only by admins, but then in my question service, I'm doing an including a question, yep, that'll let me do that include. It's not going to sanitize it for me. So just being careful and understanding where things, I would just recommend like playing with this to understand where things get returned and where things don't get returned, because it is important.
Right now, there is one, we do have that service. Do we want to look at what that, there's yes, another attribute, and there's also some attributes with respect to when I have methods.
So on here, you can do, there's allow X, or there's I forget the name of it. It's like execute. Is it execute?
Okay, I appreciate it.
Okay, execute, and then you have all kind of the same thing. So you can do roles, you can do security permission levels. So you can allow, authorize, allow all, deny all.
And this is a little different because you don't have the read write all that. It's just whether or not someone can call this endpoint.
Yep. And you can see by default, everything by default again is just allow, authorize. So if we look here, execute is allow, authenticated.
So now what if we wanted to, we already showed kind of how to open that up. So it's the same way, you just execute, allow all, and boom.
Yeah, so there you go. So now everybody can execute as soon as I run Coalesce.
Yeah, so we run Coalesce again, that field would change to red, allow all, and you then have access to all the things.
Yep, nice and easy. And then yeah, and again, this takes roles, so you can do it by only admins or whatever you want to do. This does not take restrictions. So just to be clear, restrictions are only on properties. They're not on classes.
Right. And the reason is because you can do your restrictions right in that. If you're going to do a restriction, just do it right inside of whatever method that is. So you can do, if you're having to do a lookup, you're fine. The only reason they exist in the other place is because there's nowhere to hook into that other than the restriction. So again, if you want to use services to kind of do everything, that's one way to do it, and you can basically have full control. It is nice to be able to have a lot of the built-in Coalesce stuff to do the basic editing and things like that. So it provides some really nice features there. So let's go in and look at one of those methods real quick and just see what we haven't really taken a look at what the generated code looks like, just so we can see what those attributes are.
Yeah, let's run Coalesce real quick just so I update all my stuff.
Because sometimes it's nice just to kind of pull that curtain back just a touch and see what's back there. This is not going to be a deep dive. We'll do that some other time.
Yeah. You want to look at the question
No,
service?
just the and not necessarily the front end, but just the API that the generated code for the
Okay.
for the controller.
Mm-hmm. And that is, if I remember.
It's under API.
Oh yeah, up here. I'm like, it's somewhere over here. You want to do question service? Do you have a preference?
Whichever one.
Whatever.
I think it's fine.
Okay.
But just so they can see, just so all the folks can kind of take a look and see what this looks like. So.
Yep. So this is a C# file, to be clear. It is on our web app, but I mean, our web app is an ASP.NET app, so.
But it's not the view side of it.
It's not. It's C# specifically. So and it looks just like an ASP.NET controller. I mean, it is an ASP.NET controller. Not that it just looks like it is, right?
And so if you look down line 43, you can see the allow anonymous
right there.
So that's going to be the anonymous one. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of the mapping files that do the mapping. That's the other place where this happens. So this is one of the set inside that API, and there's also the mapping that allows us to see the ETOs and how that works.
I think is that this guy?
Yep. So they're there, right? So there's these DTOs that then have mappers, and there's a map to and a map from, and you can then see how these work, and you can see the security restrictions right there. And so this just gives you an idea of exactly how these get laid out and how you get from the internal object to the DTO.
Yep.
Again, if you want to see some more detail about how this works, feel free to leave a comment. We're happy to kind of dive into some detail on that one. So I think that's a decent. Meg, we missing any parts that we should talk about security wise?
I think that's it. It's pretty basic security. Security can get pretty in depth.
We built some apps that have really in-depth security when it comes to we have like a mentor type relationship where the ability to edit a field is based on a person's assignment to another object.
Yeah, and that's all handled with those restrict attributes. Those restrict attributes are very powerful, but they are also easy to misuse, and they're also easy to mess up.
Yeah, but as long as you know what you're going in, I mean, this is true, and there's really no difference between that and any other security. You just have to really understand what's going on, and you need to do testing. Make sure you're doing some testing, and that will give you some confidence that you're actually building this correctly. And because it's built in a way that you can actually do some pretty easy unit tests. Another thing, if you want to see some unit testing, we're happy to build some of that out. So throw some notes in the comments there.
Yeah. If you guys want to see auth unit testing, I mean, let us know what you want to do.
Great. Anything else we should cover? I think we've hit most of the bases there.
Yeah, I think that's it. Maybe only one last thing is if you do want to learn more about security, Coalesce has a nice doc page on security, and it kind of goes over everything we talked about a little bit more in depth. And it's pretty long. I would recommend reading through it, though. It's a pretty good page.
And one thing to remember is that you do not secure an application by changing your TypeScript code or your HTML or your CSS, right? That you need to secure the backend, and that's why we really talked only about security in the backend. There is and the security attributes actually push to the front end, and you can see where some of those are. So you can do risk because you want to really do it in two parts. You want to secure the backend, which is the important part, but then you want to have a good user experience so that you don't have users they shouldn't get, hey, you're not allowed to do this, right?
Yeah.
You should provide a UI that doesn't allow them to do things that they're not allowed to do. And so when you look at designing your UI, think about how that's going to work. I mean, you may have an admin page, you may have an allow all page, and you may have a regular user page that do different things. Or maybe you're going to have one page that then has some code in it that allows you to turn on and off like the editability of fields, or if there's a delete option or an add a new option or things like that, you may only get those in certain contexts. But the idea is to make it so that users aren't saying, hey, you don't have permission to do the thing. So
yeah. Or even worse, you don't have permission to do this, and we're only restricting on TypeScript.
Right.
So.
If you just restrict on the TypeScript, then somebody just goes and looks at your TypeScript, and they can see, oh, let me just call this endpoint, or let me just modify this bit of code on the front end, and now I can change all the things on the back end. So make sure you do all your restrictions on the back end, all of your security, but then hopefully give your users a super nice experience at the same time. So awesome. Yep. I think that wraps things up for security. So thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep on building awesome Coalesce apps.
Yeah, thanks all.